What's the greatest 3-album run of all time? I'm not sure. Do you know? I don't believe you. So that's what I'm doing today. I've compiled a list of 60 of the best 3-album runs of all time, the cream of the crop, and also the Red Hot Chili Peppers. To do so, I've used albumoftheyear.com's user score, and I'm only including 3 album runs that all net a user score of above 80, and a couple exceptions because I do what I want. With that out of the way, let's get started. The Jimi Hendrix Experience, Are You Experienced, Axis, Bold as Love, and Electric Ladyland. Only 3 albums they ever put out, and they're all classic records. One of the greatest runs in history, I'd say. Best of the 3 is Electric Ladyland, pretty comfortably. Opening the video with a GOAT trilogy. Iron Maiden, Power Slave, Somewhere in Time, and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Really consistent trilogy, this one, but none of these records do I absolutely adore. I wouldn't say. I like them all, but I don't love any of them. My favorite here, Power Slave, I suppose, but I could have gone with any of those here. A tier. Pearl Jam, 10, Versus, and Vitalogy. This one I kind of just snuck in here. I don't actually know why. I like these guys. 10, undeniably a classic grunge record. Versus, I would say a pretty underrated grunge record. And Vitalogy, also a grunge record. Vitalogy holds this back pretty heavily, I'd say, but if I could erase Bugs from my memory, this would probably do better. Overambitious album, that last one. Best of the 3, blatantly 10. No question about it for me. C-tier trilogy, though. Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power, Far Beyond Driven, and The Great Southern Trendkill. This one does qualify, but I rate it pretty similarly to the Pearl Jam trilogy, I'd say. All 3 records are pretty good in this case, but none of them do I really like. Best here is The Great Southern Trendkill, I'd say. Still top of the C-tier. David Bowie, Station to Station, Low, and Heroes. Oh, I forgot to mention, 1 trilogy per artist in this video. It doesn't come up often, but with Bowie and a couple other cats, it does. 3 absolutely legendary albums back to back to back. Best here is Station to Station, I'd say, but you can't go wrong with any of these 3. Back of the GOAT tier. The Smiths' self-titled record, Meat is Murder, and The Queen is Dead. Narrowly made it in here. Meat is Murder I'd describe as good, but not much more than that. The other 2, pretty sensational records, I'd say. The Queen is Dead, the obvious highlight here, but I enjoy the self-titled record quite a bit. Good trilogy, but Meat is Murder holds this back from the A tier, I'd say. I'm gonna go B tier. Talking Heads, Fear of Music, Remain in Light, and Speaking in Tongues. Really damn good trilogy. I know the list looks top-heavy now, but I think it'll work itself out. Don't worry, dear viewer. Not typically my go-to genre of music, I wouldn't say, but this is absolutely the peak of whatever the fuck this is called. Remain in Light, the obvious best here. Back of the GOAT tier for the trilogy. Primus, Frizzle Fry, Sailing the Seas of Cheese, and Pork Soda. I wish Les Claypool's voice didn't bother me as much as it does because, man, instrumentally, these records are pretty incredible. Inconsistent, especially Pork Soda, but pretty good records. I can't hate on them anymore. I'll admit when I was wrong. Frizzle Fry, comfortably the best of these. Back of the B tier for the trilogy. Opeth, My Arms, Your Horse, Still Life, and Blackwater Park. Really strong trilogy. I could probably live without My Arms, Your Horse, but the other 2 records are damn close to the peak of progressive metal as a whole. Blackwater Park is the best here, I'd say. S tier trilogy. The Cure, The Head on the Door, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and Disintegration. 1 GOAT and his 2 kid brothers kind of situation here. Disintegration, one of the best records ever made, and the other 2 having some legendary individual tracks, I'd say, but I don't think they're the best top to bottom listens. Back at the A tier, I think. I gotta keep Robert Smith away from Morrissey. Michael Jackson, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. Mr. Jackson's first appearance in one of my videos with undeniably one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Bad the weak link here, but Bad being the weakest record in a trilogy is fucking nuts. Thriller's gotta be the best here. I'm torn between top of S and back of GOAT. I'm gonna go top of S for now. Metallica, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All. Another fantastic trilogy here. I'm not incredibly high on Injustice for All, but the other 2 are undeniably some of the greatest metal records ever made. Were Injustice for All produced better, we might have a GOAT here, but Master of Puppets is comfortably the best record here. S tier, above Opeth. Death, Individual Thought Patterns, Symbolic, and The Sound of Perseverance. Individual Thought Patterns is a record I often forget about, to be honest, and it's a damn shame. It's not their peak, but man, is it still an absolutely fantastic album. The other 2 obvious contenders for the best metal record of all time. Symbolic, the best tier, GOAT tier, behind Jimi Hendrix. Deftones, Saturday Night Wrist, Diamond Eyes, and Koi no Yokan. I would have loved to include White Pony and Around the Fur in this trilogy, but those records have ass on their right and ass on their left. This is the next best trilogy, and while Koi no Yokan is one of my favorite albums from these guys, period, Saturday Night Wrist is an album I'm often less unsatisfied with, I'd say. Good, but not great for that one. Top of the B tier. Outkast, Atlians, Aquamini, and Stankonia. Maybe just flat out the greatest hip-hop trilogy ever. 3 legendary records in a row. My favorite is comfortably Aquamini, but you can't go wrong with any of these, I wouldn't say. GOAT tier. behind Jimi Hendrix. Elliott Smith's self-titled record, Either Or and XO. Excellent run here. I don't listen to much Elliott Smith. I end up miserably sad every time. But when I do, the quality of the music is undeniable. One of the most talented songwriters to ever live, for sure. Either Or is my favorite record here, behind Death in the GOAT tier for the trilogy. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and Animals. If there's an actual greatest trilogy of all time, this is it. Pink Floyd's 70s run is probably just the greatest run in music history. I can't think of anything that really comes close for me. I'm a huge fan of the band, but the quality of these three albums and the impact they've had on music culture is undeniable. Dark Side is my personal favorite, but I would accept any answer with this one. Top of the GOAT tier. Kanye West, The College Dropout, Late Registration, and Graduation. My God, what a time. The early 2000s, before Kanye met the Antichrist and her associates. Another one of the greatest hip-hop trilogies of all time. Higher highs than the Outkast trilogy, but also lower lows, I'd say. The College Dropout, my favorite here, comfortably, behind Death in the GOAT tier. Faith No More, The Real Thing, Angel Dust, and King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime. Pretty fire stuff. Due to Mike Patton's insatiable urge to be as strange as possible, a lot of these records end up with a couple stinky tracks, but I think all three of these albums are pretty good. Angel Dust is my favorite, but King for a Day is an incredibly close second. B tier, above Primus. Fiona Apple, Title, Win the Pawn, and Extraordinary Machine. She's got 5 albums, 4 of them are pretty great, so you'd think a trilogy would be almost guaranteed here. Right smack dab in the middle of these 5 records is a super average record from Fiona Apple. Win the Pawn, excellent album, but this trilogy is heavily held back by Extraordinary Machine. Just a pretty average record, I'd say, top to bottom. Above The Cure, in the A tier. Kendrick Lamar, Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, and Damn. 2 of the greatest albums ever recorded, and damn. The first 2 do, 90% of the heavy lifting here, but Damn is a pretty solid album in its own right. Not nearly matching the quality of the first 2, but probably a slightly underrated record top to bottom. Top of the S tier for the trilogy. System of a Down, self-titled record, Toxicity, and Steal This Album. Same kind of thing with Fiona Apple here. Steal This Album, comfortably my least favorite System record, is dead center of their 5-album discography. Toxicity, perhaps the greatest metal record ever made, and their self-titled record, a super fun metal project. Steal This Album I find to be a super loose, kind of just a bunch of filler tracks thrown together, which I know it is, but I'm not a huge fan of that record. Top of the A tier. Talk Talk, The Color of Spring, Spirit of Eden, and Laughingstock. I'm not too familiar with these cats, but all 3 of these are pretty great records. I don't absolutely love any of these, but the latter 2 are seriously great projects. The first, I'll hold my tongue. I don't know why I said that, it's not that bad. Laughingstock is the best here. Top of the B tier. Ween, The Mollusk, White Pepper, and Quebec. Gene and Dean have done it again. I love these guys. The Mollusk and Quebec, 2 albums rapidly becoming some of my favorites ever. And White Pepper, a solid thumbs up at best. It's still a pretty good record, but it's far more generic than the other 2. I give Quebec the win here. Back of the S tier for the trilogy. Led Zeppelin 4, Houses of the Holy, and Physical Graffiti. 2 GOATs and a solid album seems to be the case with a lot of bands in this video. Same thing here. Led Zeppelin 4 and Physical Graffiti, 2 genuine must-listen records, I would say. Houses of the Holy perhaps has some must-listen songs on it, but isn't half as consistent as those other 2 records. Led Zeppelin 4 is my favorite here, behind Michael Jackson, in the S tier. Tyler the Creator, Flower Boy, Igor, and Call Me If You Get Lost. Pretty solid trilogy. One of the best hip-hop artists in recent memory, I'd say. Certainly his best 3 projects. Igor the best comfortably here. Back of the S tier for the trilogy. Nirvana, Bleach, Nevermind, and In Utero. I don't know if Incesticide is a real album, but I didn't include it here. It's listed as a compilation, and I don't think it would be considered an album had Kurt not died. In Utero and Nevermind, 2 of the most influential rock albums ever released. Bleach, super duper mid. I don't see what you cats see in that album. It's got its tracks, but it's nothing I'd listen to top to bottom. There's no point. In Utero and Nevermind are always equal in my mind. Today, I prefer In Utero. Tomorrow, I'll probably prefer Nevermind. Behind System of a Down, in the A tier. Radiohead, The Bends, OK Computer, and Kid A. This is another answer I'd argue as correct. 2 of the greatest albums ever made in OK Computer and Kid A, and a pretty great third wheel in The Bends. While it's not matching the quality of those other 2 records, I think it's still an incredible listen top to bottom. As long as you lobotomize yourself as soon as Soul starts playing, this is a great experience top to bottom, like I said. OK Computer, comfortably my favorite here, behind Pink Floyd, in the GOAT tier. Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream, Melancholy in the Infinite Sadness, and Adore. Same kind of thing with Nirvana, just kind of better, I'd say. I prefer all 3 of these records to their individual counterparts. Siamese Dream, one of my favorite albums ever. Melancholy, one of the best double albums I've ever heard, and Adore, another album I've heard. Many stinkers on that album. Back of the S tier for the trilogy. The Roots, Illadelph Half-Life, Things Fall Apart, and Phrenology. Two absolutely incredible hip-hop records here in Illadelph Half-Life and Things Fall Apart. Phrenology, comfortably the weakest record here, but I like some songs on there. Back of the beats here for the trilogy. A Tribe Called Quest, People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm, The Low End Theory, and Midnight Marauders. Nearly one of the greatest hip-hop trilogies ever. The latter two records, both contenders for the best hip-hop album of all time. The first one, name's too long, I'm not saying it again, is significantly weaker than the other two, but still a pretty solid album, I'd say. The Low End Theory, my favorite of these three, behind Opeth in the S tier. Black Country New Road, For the First Time, Ants From Up There, and Forever How Long. Ants From Up There, one of the best albums in the last decade, comfortably. For the First Time, a severely underrated record, and Forever How Long, a record I'd describe as solid at best. They lost their vocalist between the last two records, and I'm not sure how involved he was in the creative process on the first two records, but his absence is incredibly blatant here, not just vocally, but also creatively. Behind Fiona Apple in the A tier. Tupac, Me Against the World, All Eyes on Me, and The Don Illuminati, The 7-Day Theory. A pretty solid trilogy, actually. I think the albums just kind of get worse here as they go, but all three I'd give a solid thumbs up. No GOAT albums here, but three solid ones, I'd say. Behind Deftones, in the B tier. Mastodon, Leviathan, Blood Mountain, and Crack the Sky. Good, but not great. Crack the Sky the best here. Blood Mountain, a pretty forgettable record, to be honest. Leviathan, I've talked about a couple times. It's pretty good. Behind Deftones, in the B tier. Muse, Origin of Symmetry, Absolution, and Black Holes and Revelations. Probably doesn't belong here, to be honest. Three solid albums, but I don't love any of these three. Origin of Symmetry is the closest, but I think this band is better consumed through their hits than I would listen to a record top to bottom. Top of the C tier, I fear. Rage Against the Machine's self-titled record, Evil Empire, and The Battle of Los Angeles. Now we're back. Those last three, could have wiped them from my memory, I'd feel fine, but this is a fucking trilogy. Their self-titled record, one of my favorite albums ever, and the other two I describe as pretty fucking great projects. Self-titled, the obvious highlight, but I'll give the trilogy S tier, behind Opeth. Sufjan Stevens, Illinois, The Age of Ads, and Carrie and Lowell. Not typically my go-to genre, but some of the best singer-songwriter albums ever written for sure. Illinois, to be honest, I'm not sure I fully get. I think it's great, but not quite as legendary as these goofballs seem to think on albumoftheyear.com. The Age of Ads, there's nothing written here. Carrie and Lowell, seriously one of the most devastatingly beautiful albums I've ever heard. Unfathomably heartbreaking and my favorite in the trilogy. Behind Led Zeppelin, in the S tier. Modest Mouse, This Is a Long Drive for Someone with Nothing to Think About, The Lonesome Crowded West, and The Moon and Antarctica. Pretty great shit here. I like all three of these quite a bit. The Lonesome Crowded West, a borderline legendary album, I'd say. Top to bottom, absolutely incredible and almost indescribable. The Moon and Antarctica, pretty great as well. I'm not saying the first one's name again. Top of the A tier for this. Godspeed You Black Emperor, F Sharp, A Sharp Infinity, Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven, and Yankee UXO. Two of the greatest albums ever here in the first two. Lift Your Skinny Fists, genuinely one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. It's a strange one, but absolutely unreal album. The third wheel is quite a bit weaker than the first two, I'd say, but that more so speaks to the ridiculous quality of the first two projects than it does for the album's quality itself. Behind Radiohead in the GOAT tier. The Velvet Underground's self-titled record, White Light/White Heat, and their second self-titled record. If you know my channel, you know I don't understand the banana. I like the album, but I think it's borderline egregiously overrated. I understand its influence, but just as an album, I can't say I love it. I feel the same way about the second self-titled record. It's great, but not quite legendary. The Middle Child here is decent enough, but nothing to write about. Banana's still the best. Back of the A tier for the trilogy. Swans, The Seer, To Be Kind, and The Glowing Man. Another correct answer, I'd say. I'm pretty new to this band, so perhaps it's recency bias, but all three of these albums are nearly flawless works top to bottom. It's not for everybody, but if you get it, you get it. You know what I mean? To Be Kind is my personal favorite here, behind Radiohead in the GOAT tier. Alice in Chains, Dirt, Jar of Flies, and Tripod. My Glorious King, Lane's iconic three-album run. I've got to factor in my bias here. This is one of my favorite bands of all time, but even so, I can't call this trilogy one of the greatest ever. Dirt, one of my favorite records ever recorded top to bottom, and I think maybe the best grunge record ever. Jar of Flies, an absolutely phenomenal record, one of my favorite EPs of all time. And Tripod, a great album, I'd say, but not quite a legendary one. Perhaps more consistent than something like Facelift, but it sacrifices the peaks of that album to do so, I'd say. Above Nirvana in the A tier. Pixies, Surfer Rosa, Doolittle, and Bossa Nova. It's alright, I'd say. Doolittle the best, the other two I was fairly unimpressed by. Surfer Rosa does have the Fight Club song, though. That's pretty neat. Top of the C tier. The Red Hot Chili Peppers' self-titled record, Freaky Styley, and the Uplift Mofo Party Plan. I've only included what are considered good trilogies on this list, however subjective that may be, but I thought it'd be fun to also include perhaps the single worst trilogy I've ever heard. Anthony Kiedis, perhaps in between pedophilic crimes, managed to write 3 of the worst records I've ever heard, back to back to fucking back. Seriously, all 3 albums are without a singular good song. That's fucking impressive. I can acknowledge some good songs on records like Californication, By the Way, Stadium Arcadium, sure, but all 3 of these are seriously irredeemably bad. This is a Youch tier trilogy. Portishead, Dummy, self-titled record, and third, a much-needed palate cleanser after that stinker trilogy, Dummy, a legendary record top to bottom. Their self-titled record, probably the weakest in the trilogy, but not by a crazy amount. And third, a pretty underrated project from this group. I like all 3 of these. This is a great trilogy. Top of the A tier. Mr. Bungle's self-titled record, Disco Volante and California. Just barely snuck this one in here. I don't know, I really like this band. California, seriously one of my favorite albums. Inexplicably strange, but incredibly written. The other 2, marginally weaker albums, I'd say, but still solid records and have that strange factor hammered right in. Behind Deftones in the B tier. Steely Dan, The Royal Scam, Aja, and Gaucho. The Royal Scam is pretty good, I'd say. Pretty consistently solid. Aja, a phenomenal project. But Gaucho kind of resembles a polar bear in Arlington, Texas here. It's alright, but never really hits the highs the other 2 do. Consistently good, though, I'd say. Behind the Smiths in the B tier. Fishman's Cuckoo Camp, Long Season, and I can't say that shit still. Fishman's is truly known for Long Season, and while that's fair, it's one of the greatest albums ever. These other 2 albums are also pretty phenomenal projects. Cuckoo Camp, definitely the weakest of the 3, but all 3 I thoroughly enjoy listening to, top to bottom. Some of the most beautiful shit ever written, I'd say. Behind Swans in the GOAT tier. Black Sabbath's self-titled record, Paranoid, and Master of Reality. Ludicrous run from these guys. The self-titled record, probably the weakest of the 3, I guess. Paranoid, comfortably the best, but all 3 a must-listen for fans of metal, or to be honest, fans of music. You can't go wrong here. Behind Metallica in the S tier. Stone Temple Pilots, Core, Purple, and Tiny Music, songs from the Vatican gift shop. I love these guys, but I can't call this an excellent trilogy, I don't think. The first 2 records feature some of the highest peaks in the grunge movement, I'd say. But Tiny Music seriously leaves me wanting more from this band. It's a super unique record in their catalog, but I don't often throw this on top to bottom. Back of the B tier. Tool, Enema, Lateralis, and 10,000 Days, and now the moment you Tools have been waiting for. One of my favorite trilogies of all time. The 3 best albums in their discography comfortably. Order them how you want, but keep Undertow and Fear Inoculum the fuck out of the conversation. I give the edge to Lateralis personally. It's had the biggest impact on my own life, but Enema is damn close in terms of sheer quality. 10,000 Days, I'd say, is the weakest here, but I could turn all 3 of these on top to bottom and glisten with whimsical joy, I'd say. Behind Pink Floyd in the GOAT tier. Bob Dylan, Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61 Revisited, and Blonde on Blonde. Pretty fucking iconic trilogy right here. You can't go wrong with a single album on this. All genuinely legendary records. I don't think I have a preference here. I find they're all pretty equal in quality. GOAT tier behind Bowie for the trilogy. Gojira, From Mars to Sirius, The Way of All Flesh, and L'Enfant Sauvage. 3 pretty fantastic prog metal records. From Mars to Sirius, one of the best metal records ever made. The other 2, not quite contenders, but some pretty excellent metal records in their own regard. All 3 pretty fantastic. I'm thinking A tier, behind System of a Down. Arcade Fire, Funeral, Neon Bible, and The Suburbs. Pretty solid run here. I think this band just slowly gets worse over time until they peaked earlier this year with Pink Elephant. My God, was that bad. But their first 3 records are all pretty good. Funeral comfortably the best, but the other 2 are solid projects, I'd say. Not much more than that, though. B tier, behind Mastodon. 9 Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral, The Fragile, and Still. Pretty ridiculous 2-album run here with the first 2 albums, but Still is probably one of the most underrated records I've seen in their discography. It's got some remakes on there, but the new tracks on here are fucking nuts, man. The Downward Spiral, one of the most intriguing and incredibly written albums ever heard, as is The Fragile on a slightly smaller scale, I'd say. Behind Ween in the S tier. The Beatles, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, and Magical Mystery Tour. I could have cut Revolver and threw in the White Album, but I think that record is just a touch overrated, to be honest. These 3, all legendary projects, some of the most influential music ever written, bar none. Absolutely legendary 3-album run, undeniably so, above Jimi Hendrix in the GOAT tier. Paramore, Brand New Eyes, their self-titled record, and After Laughter. And last but not quite least, Paramore, it's alright. None of these blew my socks off, but none of these make me want to blow my head off. Pretty solid run. C tier above Pearl Jam just because I said they weren't last, and I'm not rewriting that. That's all I have written here. Here's my final list. Note that if I didn't include your favorite 3-album run, I either hate the band you like, or I didn't think it was good enough. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.